The Yamaha R7 is one of the big names among middleweight sports bikes, but it is 2026 and there are some exciting alternatives. The Zontes 703 RR and the CFMOTO 675 SRR. What can these bikes do? Can they keep up with the R7? That is what Martin and I found out here at the Slovakiaring. And with that, welcome to 1000 PS TV and to the 1000 PS Bridgestone Trackdays at the Slovakiaring. We spent 2 days out here, not only on these bikes, but also on other test bikes. You will find all the videos on our 1000 PS channel. And of course, I also want to briefly draw your attention to the helmets we had with us on the bikes. We had the HJCRF12 with us, mine in the beautiful Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas design. Then over here we also have Venom and Anti-Venom. 3 absolutely exclusive and genuinely lovely designs, which you can actually ride in as well. We were out there using them, and the design really convinced us. So HJC, go and check them out. Briefly about us. I see myself as an absolute hobby track day rider. I ride a handful of days here on the racetrack, so for me, it is not about lap times, it is simply about riding a bit faster again and getting the joints moving a little. With you, Martin, I do not think I need to say much. A proper, thoroughbred professional. I was just about to say that I'm glad you are here because you can simply ride out other little nuances that I, of course, would never reach. I think these middleweight sports bikes are a really interesting category because they try to bridge the gap between everyday use and a bit of racing as well. And that makes it exciting to ride these bikes here on the racetrack in completely standard trim. So I would like to start straight away with a category that is not the engine, Martin, but the ergonomics. Because yes, these bikes are ridden a lot on the road, but when you take them onto a racetrack, it still needs to make sense properly. What nuances did you notice there, or what differences? Let us say we start with the Yamaha.
The Yamaha is incredibly pleasant when it comes to moving around on the bike and riding it dynamically. Thanks to the very slim engine layout, we have a very narrow chassis in front of us. So in terms of width, it is very slim. You sit on it quite nicely. It is a sporty riding position, but still very comfortable for everyday use. I think that is an important point, not pushing that too far. Most manufacturers are already quite conservative in that respect anyway, and are no longer quite as aggressive as you might know from some older bikes. So on the Yamaha, it is a very good compromise between sportiness and everyday usability.
I was still surprised that the clip-ons are mounted relatively low. If we look over at the Zontes, it is already the opposite there. I think the handlebar really comes towards you quite a lot. Of course, that is comfortable for everyday use, but how did you feel that on the racetrack, Martin?
For the racetrack, it is already very upright. You are missing a bit of feel and contact with the front tire. It still lets you ride very quickly, but you do miss a little bit of that direct feeling from the front tire here. The clip-ons themselves are also very straight. If we look at the Yamaha, we do have a good sweep back. Here they are almost turned straight, very far forwards and very high. It is not really the ideal riding position for sporty riding. For a country road, of course, it is a bit more pleasant, more upright and a bit more comfortable.
A good middle ground, I would say, is almost the CFMOTO, because its handlebar is lower again than on the Zontes, but not quite as sporty as on the Yamaha. So you could see it as a compromise between the two, right?
Yes, you are absolutely right there. Here we have a relatively large distance between the handlebar at the front and the seat. So you sit fairly far back on the bike. That already gives you a slightly sportier posture. For the racetrack, it really works well. I also like the bike in terms of its basic stability, and this riding position underlines that even more. But it still offers a certain amount of riding comfort for the road as well. As you say, you can call it a good middle ground between an R7 and the Zontes.
Now, moving straight on to the next chapter, the engine, we have not arranged them like this just because the engine concepts are different, but of course also because it is newcomers against the established benchmark. The Yamaha comes here with a parallel twin. The parallel twin, the CP2 with an offset crank pin, which we know from the MT-07. A really good-natured, well-behaved engine. In this sports bike, when you ride it day to day, I think it has a nice punch from the mid-range, but here on the racetrack, especially at the Slovakiaring, it does eventually start to run out of steam.
I have also ridden it on other racetracks, ones that do not necessarily have such long straights as we have here at the Slovakiaring. And there, I do not think the engine performance is bad at all. Especially for a beginner, it is very easy and very accessible to handle the bike. The engine responds very pleasantly. It is super controllable. Of course, that is also because in the upper range, where the peak power arrives, it is not that aggressive and is a bit restrained. As you rightly say, on racetracks like the Slovakiaring, or generally on circuits where you spend a long time going straight, you do notice that on the straight, you could almost read a newspaper. On a tight circuit, of course, that is exactly what is ideal for the bike. Back then, we were down in Spain on a very twisty and very technical racetrack, and there it was, properly good fun. The engine also suits it quite well there. You tend to ride more in the lower gears, and then it is really good fun to be able to exploit the concept a little.
Especially because for 2026, the R7 received a major update. Not only to the electronics, but we now also have a quick shifter included, up and down as standard. In this class, I think that is already a real plus. And above all, the engine response. Especially when you are new to the racetrack, I think if you then have a strong load change, that can feel unpleasant. The Yamaha, though, does not have that.
You can feel it there as well, sorry for interrupting you, but you can really feel the development work and know-how that Yamaha brings to the table. Everything works extremely smoothly. And in terms of refinement, the engine offers a broad, usable performance range. For the power it has, you can use quite a lot of the rev range. You can also pull away nicely from low revs. So from the engine concept alone, it is an absolutely top bike for beginners, both on the road and on the racetrack, as long as there are not too many long straights.
Exactly. But I would say we now move from the weakest bike in this comparison, with 73 horsepower, to the strongest one, the Zontes 703 RR. We quote 95 horsepower, which means it can still be restricted for an A2 license. The engine is a pure triple, more old school in character. We do not have ride-by-wire, so accordingly, there is only a quick shifter for upshifts. For downshifts, you have to shift down in the classic way, with the clutch. The engine naturally has more performance in reserve, but not everything was quite so positive here on the racetrack.
Basically, the triple layout is exactly the right thing for my taste when it comes to riding both on the racetrack and on the road. On the one hand, a triple already offers good drive from low down, but at the top end, it still has a certain willingness to rev. And I really like that. Zontes has implemented that quite well too. So purely in terms of its mechanical design, the engine has turned out well. The only thing is the calibration, where it still struggles a little. You notice a strong load change. It is difficult to get on the throttle very smoothly, and that slightly disturbs the overall concept. The engine itself is genuinely solid at its core, and in terms of performance, it is very substantial as well. You can really turn that into proper drive. It is mainly in the control side where it lacks a bit. Ride-by-wire is not necessarily the reason why it falls a bit short here. It simply needs a little more fine-tuning in the engine mapping itself. These days, that can already be done a bit better. Maybe there will be another update in that direction, but otherwise, I have to say the engine has turned out really well.
Okay, and then we come to the third bike. It sits almost in the middle. The CFMOTO 675 SRR offers 90 horsepower, and to my mind, especially now next to the Zontes, the engine always felt very strangled. But you did not feel it that way, Martin. What is that down to? Is it because of the extra pounds I'm carrying, or what is the reason?
Not the pounds. A teardrop shape is always aerodynamic. You do have to say, though, that what you are saying is not entirely wrong. It does feel a bit strangled, but that is also because the engine and exhaust system are a little more muted. The engine runs a bit calmer and more smoothly, and because of that, it does not feel quite as aggressive at the top end. To me, they are actually neck and neck in terms of acceleration. So the difference here is only marginal, but the feeling on the CFMOTO is a little different because the sound is not quite as aggressive, a bit more subdued, and the engine refinement is also a bit rounder, a bit softer, and the load change is not quite as harsh as we have here on the Zontes. That makes the whole thing come across a bit finer and more mature, but of course not quite as aggressive.
You just said they are on the same level, but where they are not on the same level is equipment and electronics. I would say we go straight into the next chapter there, because in this comparison, the Yamaha is the most expensive. It costs 11,000 euros in Germany, the Zontes 8,300 and the CFMOTO 8,000. That means there can be up to 3,000 euros between the bikes, and you notice that in the equipment. The Yamaha R7 received a major update for 2026, a 6-axis IMU, lean angle sensitive safety systems and further riding assistance systems are still on board. On top of that, there are several riding modes, which you can also customize. That means you really do have a lot of adjustment options. If you look over towards China, to Zontes and CFMOTO, everything is kept rather simpler there. We have riding modes on both bikes, but you cannot adjust them nearly as much. And of course, the safety systems, ABS and traction control, are not lean angle sensitive. Martin, I would say we start with the positive example of how electronics can be done, the Yamaha R7. So I rode it, Philip rode it, and of course you rode it too. And actually we all said the same thing. It is very easy to ride, it is approachable, and you can set the systems up the way you want them. And the quality of the intervention is, of course, also at a very high level here.
That is exactly the case. With Yamaha, you have years of experience to draw on. And of course, you can feel that now on the smaller bikes as well, because the quality of the intervention and the control algorithms behind it are simply very good and very well calibrated. There is not really anything missing. You can feel that experience, whether we are talking about the ABS setup or the traction control. The rider aids as a whole work at a top level, at a very high level. Even when you are moving quickly here on the racetrack, you never really unsettle it or get it into a range where the whole thing stops working properly. It is always at a very high level. It also offers a lot of features, you have to say that as well. With the ABS, which is especially important for the racetrack, you also have the option to deactivate ABS for the rear wheel. That not only gives you a lot of freedom for plenty of fun on the racetrack, and partly on the road as well, but of course it also allows extremely efficient braking because you can deactivate this rear wheel lift detection here in order to generate even more braking force in the dry and in good conditions. And there the Yamaha really does shine very strongly within this trio, you have to say.
Unfortunately, it was not quite as positive with the competition from Zontes and CFMOTO. I did not ride that out myself at all because I simply do not dare to brake that late here at the end of the start-finish straight. But you said it is simply not solved as finely on these two products. What is that down to? Is it the calibration? Is it also the price? And start with this. What did you actually experience there?
You have to say, that is probably where the biggest difference lies in these calibrations and in this fine-tuning of the electronics between the Yamaha and the two newcomers, Zontes and CFMOTO. You can feel that quite a lot can still be improved here and should be improved for the future. The components that are fitted, if we talk straight away about the brake, are basically fine. We have good deceleration figures. That is not where it fails. Where it really becomes a bit problematic, especially when you go onto the racetrack, is in this basic performance, in this calibration, which in some situations simply offers too little braking deceleration, where without the system you could brake much harder. Especially when it comes to wanting to brake into lean angle, the calibration here is still a bit rudimentary. It is very much on the cautious side and at times only releases very little braking deceleration. And of course, that is exactly what you want on the racetrack, to have a very good and stable brake available in every situation. And that blurs the whole picture a little, because the basic performance, as already mentioned, of the brake itself is fundamentally good. When the ABS allows it and does not regulate it away, we also have good deceleration figures. The chassis, I have to say, are well done too, and they remain very stable even under harder braking. But unfortunately, this algorithm behind it, between the front wheel ABS and rear wheel ABS, where you also cannot deactivate the rear wheel lift detection separately, is the issue. That alone would already improve quite a lot. Both of them are simply missing that, you have to say. And that is where the Yamaha shines, because there it is on a completely different level.
But just to put that into perspective, Martin, are these nuances in the ABS calibration that only you as a professional can ride out on the racetrack with your riding skill? Or does it become relevant elsewhere too, say on the road, for example?
It does partly become relevant on the road as well. Not quite as extremely as we have it on the racetrack, of course. But the maneuvers I rode on track just now were often nothing extreme, when I noticed that there simply was not enough deceleration. These are often riding situations you can also have on the road, because on the road there can be moments where you have a bit of lean angle, and suddenly, because some traffic situation cuts across, you also want to slow down hard. And that is actually the basic concept here for ABS to give a certain amount of safety. That is the idea behind it. Of course, that exists in the sense that you cannot overbrake the front tire. That definitely works. But I still want good deceleration as well so that I do not ride into the obstacle. And in certain positions, there is simply a need for optimization. For 90%, I have to say, it probably will not be a problem at all, because on the road you are not constantly riding in that range. But when it does matter, I would quite like to have that good feeling in the background, knowing that it will also brake hard when I need it. And both candidates still need a bit of optimization there.
Here I just want to add, for those of you watching, that on the onboard footage on the CFMOTO you may read, "No ABS, traction control." That is because when I made the recording with it, the fuse had been pulled, because that is what the colleagues do here. For example, Ewald, since this is his instructor bike that we have standing here, they simply pull the fuse on the racetrack and then you no longer have this problem. So do not worry, Martin also rode it with ABS in order to have a proper comparison here. Of course, now we have discussed all the topics individually, but let us talk generally about the riding dynamics, or in plain English, what is it actually like to ride? So for me, as a layman, I would say, just as we have already established, the Yamaha gives me a bit more safety. The calibration is a bit finer, so accordingly I can apply the throttle more smoothly. But how did you feel it, Martin, given that you really come in after 2 laps and tell me very specifically that this and that is not?
I really have to say, in terms of precision and feedback, the Yamaha is genuinely good. As you say, we have good stability in there. You get good feedback. The suspension is at a very good level, so you can really ride it quickly through a corner without it starting to move around or being forced. It works at a very high level. Having said that, the CFMOTO also goes a bit in that direction. Even on the CF, we have a lot of stability, and it also allows you to carry really high corner speed. The feedback from the tires is quite good. We also have fairly decent tires fitted to the bike now. Of course, that always depends very heavily on what tires are mounted at the time, but you can already see that the basic construction, layout, and geometry of the Chinese counterparts are also at a very good level, so they are not far behind now. They can be ridden really quickly. It is mainly the overall calibration around it, where a little bit is still missing. But the chassis has turned out very well. The Zontes is at a slight disadvantage here. A lot of emphasis has been placed on agility, and you can feel that. So it can be moved around playfully, however it lacks a bit of precision. Especially when you go into fast corners, it starts to run a bit wide, and holding tight corners or tight lines in that kind of situation is a little harder here. For everyday use, it will probably be pleasant because it has very easy and playful handling. However, when it comes to feedback, when I want to go into the limit range, you have a slightly harder time here. The suspension setup is also a bit more on the soft side, especially when it comes to the front fork. And that creates a little bit of movement, but still on a very good level. We are really only seeing this now in the direct comparison. There is nowhere where I would have to say this is really problematic or unpleasant, even on the racetrack. All the candidates are genuinely good. They simply differ in certain areas, where you can see that the Yamaha and the CFMOTO are very much designed for stability and give you a lot of feedback, while the Zontes is simply a bit more agile in comparison and therefore brings less stability with it. Those are the rough differences.
I think you can already say, as we slowly move towards a conclusion here, the Yamaha R7 is, without doubt, and rightly so, still the established benchmark. But of course it also costs up to €3,000 more than the CFMOTO in some cases. The two newcomers from China still have their points where improvements can and should be made, but they do not do anything massively wrong, and especially for people who want to watch the money a bit more and above all, want a very extroverted look. They may even be a genuinely good choice, especially if you are coming to the racetrack for the first time and maybe not quite riding at IDM World Champion level yet, the way you do, Martin. So I think you cannot really say that you would be making a wrong choice with any of these bikes, can you?
Quite the opposite. You have to say that the two bikes, Zontes and CFMOTO, also have very good foundations, especially when it comes to the chassis and the basic mechanical layout. With the engines, the triples, and the mid-size capacity, it works really well. You can already feel that they have genuinely put something good on its wheels. But when it comes to this final calibration, they still have a bit of catching up to do. That is where you notice Yamaha's moment arriving, because in these areas it simply hits the mark thanks to all that experience. You can really feel that difference there. Of course, in the direct comparison, it does have a bit of a power deficit, and it is not on the same level as the Zontes and the CFMOTO. The price difference is there, but I think that gives good room and choice for anyone who says, for example, I do also have to watch the money a bit. In that case, these two candidates are definitely an interesting alternative to the Yamaha.
And above all, it is a real statement from China. I am curious, Martin, if we are standing here again in 5 years and doing the same comparison, what the world will look like then. But in any case, that is the current state of play. The Yamaha convinced across the board, but Zontes and CFMOTO are close behind. That way you will not miss any more videos here on 1000 PS TV, and of course from the track days as well. Behind the camera, there are 3 more very exciting bikes. At the back in the pit box, there is another bike you were out on, Martin, so there is plenty to watch. Stay with us, stay tuned, and write in the comments what you think of the 3 bikes. Martin, thank you. It was nice to learn something from you again. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Take care.